Continues. The relationship between the United Nations and the Government of South Sudan continues to take strain after that country's cabinet expelled a top-ranking UN official to the other country. The UN Secretary General has condemned the ejection of the Deputy Special Representative and the country's Resident Humanitarian Coordinator after the government claimed his statements had undermined the country's sovereignty. UN statements from the Secretary General downwards have been very critical of the leadership on both sides of the country's protracted civil war that has left over 2 million people displaced and almost 4 million in need of food and aid.
He's persona non grata, and while the UN has called for the decision to be reversed, Toby Lanza's term was coming to an end and his replacement already announced.
The relationship between the Government of South Sudan and the United Nations is a critical one. Obviously, we have a very important peacekeeping mission there. The UN is providing critical humanitarian aid, and that's exactly what Mr. Lanza was doing. Contacts have continued at various levels, especially on the ground, in an effort to get the government to reverse its decision, which as of now it has not.
The recent escalation in fighting in Unity and Upper Nile states has seen a further 100,000 people displaced, while 650,000 have been cut off from life-saving aid.
The government has said they will not reverse the decision, and they've made reference to Toby Lanza's utterances and activities which allegedly undermine the nation's sovereignty. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think the Secretary General and the United Nations fully back Mr. Lanza in his activities. I think he was essential in the time that he was here in addressing the dire humanitarian situation in South Sudan, ensuring that life-saving aid would get through. I think almost every day we talk about the situation in South Sudan. I mean, we're talking about more than 1.5 million people internally displaced.
Given strongly worded statements that have been very critical of the leadership in South Sudan, we asked you, Jurek, if the expulsion of Mr. Lanza was not a case of tit for tat. The response: that the UN and the Secretary General had been very frank in their assessments of the situation on the ground. This as the Security Council continues its deliberations on whether to impose targeted sanctions and assets freezes on certain individuals there. Sherwin Bryceby's SABC News, New York.